are you?
Good. Okay, so we'll call the February 11th Permanent Building Committee / Recal Building Committee meeting to order. So a roll call attendance, Nancy Toomey,
Here.
John Coop,
Yeah.
Greg Stepler,
Here.
Kirk McCormick,
Here.
Nancy Zimlak,
Here.
Mark Doxer, who's not here. Ari Greenberg, not here, and Mike Nazaro. Here. Pat Tompkins here. Just moving on to the next item on the minutes. The first item is public comment. If there's any public comment online or in person,
All right, Pat, 30 seconds.
absolutely, go for it.
Bob Holmes, Gleason Road, 40-year plus resident of Reading. Just a request, last Tuesday at the select board meeting, the update to them from the committee. There was a communications page, and there was also something in there on that page, I think press article, which mentioned the Reading Post. I have been going to recap meetings, Simon's Way committee meetings, this committee meetings, select board meetings on behalf of the Reading Chronicle and doing articles. There was no mention of that, and I confess it was moderately, momentarily irritating. That's my pitch. Next time you do it, include the Chronicle.
We'll
We
do.
can update that slide.
Okay.
We'll update the slide, and we appreciate the fact that you're here all the time. Obviously, one of our goals, our biggest goal with communication is just to get information about the project to all of the residents before they go to the polls and vote and randomly make a decision. So we appreciate the fact that you've been here, and we appreciate everything you do to get that information out for us. And we'll make that correct.
Then fade back and look back.
Next up on the agenda is the approval of last week's meeting minutes. Have anyone had any comments? Who wants to make a motion?
Motion to accept the meeting minutes for January, was it January? No. I would do that. What's the date?
February 4th.
February 4th, 2025, as submitted.
Second. Any further discussion? Nancy Toomey,
Yes.
John Coop,
Yes.
Greg Stepler,
Yes.
Kirk McCormick,
Yes.
Nancy Zimlak,
Yes.
Mark Doxer,
Yes.
Pat Tompkins, yes. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is the budget update and invoice approval. Brian, I don't think we have any invoice approvals.
No, we don't have any invoices for approval at today's meeting. We do have just a general update. It's not really something fully tied to the permanent building committee, but it does relate to the project. And that is that we have an update that an operations plan is being developed with an outside consultant from Ballard King. So that's going to be funded from recreation and other community service funds. It's $9,500. They'll be going over use estimates, operational fees, income, cost projections, all that kind of stuff. So, and I believe that's going to start the next week or two.
Mhm.
And that's done in time for town meeting.
Yes.
So we are not gonna be doing the amendment. We're just gonna do it through staff.
And then do it directly to Ballard King.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's all for the budget.
Okay. Moving on to reports, monthly update. Back to you, Brian, for schedule update.
Yeah, so we did update the master project schedule. We put in some additional information for the DD phase, for the schematic design phase, and also pre-qualifications. We're looking at, the approval in May. And looking to go to bid by the end of the year and start construction then early part of 2026, with facility expected to open fall of 2027. So we continue to update that. I'm talking to Joel. We have some dates that we're reviewing, so we'll continue to fine tune that as we move forward. We will be doing the pre-qualification process for this project for GC and trade bids. So that's kind of an outline of the schedule. So as the OPM, we'll be leading that process, but it's usually something that involves kind of all hands on deck. Obviously, there's a lot of responses that come back. We have to go through the feedback for each of the submissions to make sure that they meet goals and they qualify. We can talk about that.
What are the acronyms? GC and.
So the GC is the general contractor who oversees the whole construction project. And then in Massachusetts, we have filed subbids for certain trades. So those are, maybe HVAC contractor, electric, things like that. Yeah, so, that's basically it for the schedule. I think, in talking with Joel, we see the value of getting this moved forward as quickly as possible. But we want to make sure that's balanced, right? There are obviously advantages to being able to do things faster. You save on escalation costs. The owner gets to operate the building sooner. But, we're going to be looking at that in detail and making sure that we have sufficient time for all of the town input and approvals. And also that, the bid climate is favorable for the contractor, so we get good bids on that. So that's it for the schedule.
I have a question on the schedule. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you or maybe Matt could explain the town warrant process. I mean, it looks like kind of dates overlap on here. And I'm just curious how
Yeah,
that
so-
works.
So for the regular town warrant for the annual town meeting, I'm presenting that to the select board next Tuesday night to review. They'll close that warrant on the 5th of March, so that warrant will be closed. We have the idea was floated about doing a special town meeting, which I think we're going to do. That is a separate warrant. The board has a longer period of time to close that. I think I have that slated for April 1st, to not only close that warrant, but call for the election, special election. And I've reviewed those dates with the town clerk, she's in agreement, so generally that's I don't know if you had anything specific, Nancy, but that's the overall process. Once we close the warrant, goes to town meeting votes, and then the election we have slated for May 13th.
Yeah, could you just talk about the timing related to the warrant for the special town meeting, when the special town meeting is proposed to take?
Yes, so the special town, what we're doing is we're doing a special town meeting within a town, which is a little bit of a different process, but something we've done before. So we'll open the town meeting at the end of April on that Monday, like we usually do. The next Thursday is May 1st. We're gonna adjourn for now, the formal annual town meeting and begin the special town meeting. And the hope is to have both Recal and Killam, heard and dealt with that night in one night. And we'll close the special town meeting, go back to the regular town meeting on the next night. And with stuff to take up the town budget, there's still important things to do besides these projects. So we're hoping to have everything done on that May 1st date. That's what we're shooting for. And have the vote. And that way we can close that special town meeting and still be in line to have the election when to have it. So that's the thinking.
When will we getting something from FinCom about financing this project?
So FinCom, we had talked about going to FinCom on the 5th of March, just to give them an update and an overview. they'll have some information that night. I mean, they vote on warrant articles essentially. So it's not the same as closing the warrant or voting for the project. It's up to the chair of FinCom. They may want to have a vote on overall whether they favor it or not. It's not required except to close that actual warrant.
But don't we have to know before town meeting votes, they need to know something about the finances?
Yeah, it would be good to know as much as possible about finances.
So the question is, when will we know about finances? When will,
Well, that's.
when will we and?
Step one is set the project budget,
Right.
you know,
Not necessarily. I mean, we all know roughly what the budgets are for the so they are presumably talking about this stuff. They're not waiting until the final budget is found to find out, are they going to do a 30-year bond or a 20-year bond?
yeah, I believe that they're having discussions about that, but we'll be looking to get feedback from that once we give them our budget, so that we know for the taxpayers what the impact will be, and we can take that information to the public meetings.
So John, I think the sequence and timing will be that we'll vote on a project budget that we are gonna present. We're gonna present to the select board and then to FinCom. And then do town meeting and then to the voters. And it should go to FinCom on March 5th. And at that time, FinCom will start giving us feedback on, or giving town feedback that they can disseminate to residents, what the impact will be.
Yeah,
So there's
Projected.
one more element.
that's my question.
There's one more element, which is that the town CFO will dig in armed with the cost estimates, the best cost estimates, and make recommendations to town, to FinCom, and eventually to town meeting in terms of how to finance whatever's going on, each of the projects. So the school project, I don't think there's any flexibility. It gets defined by the school building SBA.
Yeah.
But as it relates to recal, there could be a whole variety of options. Her role, Sharon, and would be to kind of dig through, talk with bonding groups, understand what costs would be, look at different ideas, and then come with a recommendation as to how she thinks the town could and should best finance it. 15 years, 30 years, 20 years.
We have to go with a specific number. That's correct, right?
So
It's
conversation,
not range from here to here.
No.
You have to have, this is it.
yes,
And my question is, when is, this is it?
yes, so
Is that
we
tonight?
plan that, well, from
That's
our
tonight?
standpoint, but in terms of,
Tonight or next week.
Well,
But in-
my question.
Yeah.
So that's the budget. We're gonna review the overall budget for the project tonight. And if we're enough in agreement, we'll take a vote to set that budget. Which I think we should be able to, but, there's definitely a lot of different things we need to discuss.
and the conversations about the bonds have begun. So working through Jane, we've been in contact with Sharon, we've had some initial talks. I don't know what the answer is yet, but I know that she's thinking about it and she has some ideas already. So I imagine that's going to go very quickly. I know the turnaround time, working with their agent can be, in a day, that they can get the calculations back. So it'll be a fast process. As soon as this is finalized, our budget here, like we said, we're gonna go to select board and FinCom, so that by the time we get to our public meeting, we will have that number for the tax impact, the taxpayers,
Which public meeting,
our March public meeting.
the vote is.
May 13th.
May 13th. I'm interested because we all know what sticker shock is, right? Go into buy a car, we look at the price and we say, oh, God, kind of that. And then it takes a while for people to come around to think, this is the price. If you don't have enough time for people to think of that, sticker shock effect is very powerful.
Yeah, and that's why we've tried to kind of get numbers out as early as possible. We had numbers during the feasibility stage that were, I think it was 28.8 or 28.
That's not the number that people want to hear. They want to hear how much
Yes.
am I going to pay per year on my taxes,
Mhm.
pay for these projects. And after that number is published, there will be a lot of discussion within the community for and against, which takes time to settle out, to meld into consensus. But if you don't give that enough time, difficult, because the sticker shock effect is very, very powerful.
Mark?
Just a quick comment. So, and I don't think most people in the town understand that when we do projects like this that are debt exclusions, they are finished at a certain point in time and their payments are finished as well. So the fact of the matter is that the library, the Wood End School and the high school are all projects who the last 9 months backward, 3 months forward, will all have had their last payments made by taxpayers, representing about $300 per year. And had they continued, that's how much more you'd be paying. That stops.
Yes, I understand.
That's part of the calculus.
So that information takes time to get out.
100% agree.
Community and get into people's brains.
100%
And
agree.
if we don't give them that time, we miss out.
Mhm.
So
let's get on with our
Sooner-
setting our.
Yeah, so we have-
yeah, sooner than later.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll accept the motion to vote on the budget.
Okay.
Right, I think big picture, I think that schedule, everything makes sense. It puts a lot of pressure on Joel, not a lot of pressure, but I know Joel's going pretty quick in that schedule, but he's got the resources, and he's confident he can get it done. I don't envision it will be as aggressive a timeframe for the committee as Q1 of this year has been. And just because there's a longer time period between, like, we'll want to have the documents for review at the end of DD and at some point during CDs. But that won't be till probably August, and then again towards the, maybe August and November would be those timeframes. So, and everything, schedule wise, with putting it out to bid at that timeframe, everything makes sense to me, so. That's perfect. All right. So I think that's it on the schedule update. Anything on a communications working group update?
Yeah, for sure. The communications group has been working hard on making sure that our website is up to date. We have a great fleshed out FAQ section currently on the website. Hopefully everyone has a chance to check that out. We've also finalized the next 2 public forums for the end of March. They're scheduled for Tuesday, March 25th in the evening at the Pleasant Street Center. I think we're going to do a little bit earlier this time. We're shooting for a 6:30 start. There will be refreshments served. And then we're going to run that same meeting back on Thursday here at Town Hall in the Select Board Room. We looked at various locations, including the library, the PAC. It's a busy month in town. There's just not a lot of availability. So we'll have that meeting here at Town Hall on Thursday, the 27th at 10 in the morning, and it will be the same presentation run through, hoping to offer people the same opportunity to hear the information at a different time in a different place. Hopefully that'll make it easier for more folks to attend. We will have RCTV broadcasting the one at the Pleasant Street Center on the 25th. So we will have a recording that we'll be able to share with the community. Other than that, we're continuing to work on collateral. We're working on our next cartoon EDU video with Dave Cartoonin. That's going to showcase some of the programming and some of the intentions for the space. We're looking to get that out for the end of this month. We're also hoping to get another video for the end of March that will coincide with the community meeting that will showcase some of the pricing and some of the details around the total cost once that's all hammered out. Other than that, we have the suggestion boxes set up at both the Pleasant Street Center and here at Town Hall that have been getting some feedback, and we continue to solicit feedback from the community via email. That is, we're continuing to get comments and feedback across the board on many things. That's helping inform the FAQs and helping to inform the communication strategy also. But yeah, we're continuing to roll forward and now working very closely with the OCPF, the Office of Campaign Finance, from the state level to ensure that we're abiding by all the rules and laws for both this project and the Killam School project in terms of what the town is allowed to say and how we are allowed to say it. So lots going on for sure, and lots more to come over the coming months as we continue on.
Excellent, thank
We
you.
did say at the last forum that we would invite FinCom to the next forum.
Mhm.
That's still on track.
Yes, for sure.
May I ask a question?
Sure,
Oh,
yes.
someone mentioned, once we do know what the impact on the tax is, and also explaining about the things that are paid off, this information would go out to all residents. Is there a mailing to all residents that's planned that would spell this out?
I'm not sure about a mailing.
We have seniors and probably others as well who have no internet access, for example.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
I think it's important to have written documents that go to every household.
Yeah, we haven't kind of gotten to that yet. I think that's an excellent idea, and I think would be probably wise to include information on both projects in that
Yes.
same mailer, so they're getting the, you know, the whole package at once with full explanations. And people have time to digest that.
And information about what's paid off. It's like,
Yeah.
so they understand the big picture.
yeah, for sure. And we're in the very early
I
stages.
understand.
of-
I'm not-
No, no,
I'm not
but
criticizing.
no,
I'm just
oh, no,
inquiring, 'cause I
Marilyn, no,
don't
not at all.
understand.
Of course not.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely wanting to get this out for everyone. We're in the early stages of kind of drafting what this message looks like.
Okay.
With the information you're talking about, John, in terms of the total tax impact from both projects based on your home's valuation. We're planning on a dedicated page on the website from a debt exclusion standpoint, so we'll have that content. I'll talk to Jane and Sharon and Laura about the mailing of this. It gets a little sensitive around elections, but this is separate from that. We're not talking solely about the election and what that means, but yeah, we'll definitely make sure that we're exploring all of the various
Because on
avenues.
national elections, I guess it is, we always get the thing from League of Women Voters that says vote and yes means, and it's a detailed,
And it
voting
gives
no
both sides,
means,
yes,
and
for sure.
something along those lines, I think is really important. Otherwise, the sticker shock thing is gonna be
Sure.
a big issue.
So what Katie was talking about with this Office of Campaign Finance, there may be limitations on what can happen with that. And so if there were a strong desire to get that message out, it might make sense for private groups to be considering how to do that, because the limitations on public, we'll have to see what they are.
I just have a hard time imagining that something that's going to a vote can't be shared legally in a way. that all
I'm with you.
voters have.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
I don't know what it is.
We're definitely-
And I know it's not simple, but
I'm
I
with
can't
you.
imagine it's not possible. That's almost like saying the ballot's gonna be illegal and some of the group's gonna have to print ballots,
No,
which is not true, obviously.
Absolutely, and do know that we're definitely looking at all of the avenues that we can take to ensure that the word is well publicized
Okay.
about the projects and that folks are hearing about it. One thing that we're doing is we'll include an insert in the water bill that's going out in the physical mail that will detail both of the information about both Killam and Retail, along with the trash rollout that we have, so we're jam packing information
All
there.
right,
But yes, we're
Okay.
definitely, we don't want this to be a secret to anyone. We want everyone to know what's on the line here in
Yeah.
terms of the financial impact and how they can make their voice heard.
thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, great job. Anything else on communications? Move on to sustainability update.
Actually, we have the design, just we can touch on that maybe. Of the sustainability.
Sure.
So the design working group did not have a meeting as we were getting all those design comments back. Joel has told me that those are going out today, so everyone should have those. Working group meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. And I think the larger design updates that are relevant, you know, for tonight is that, you know, there are some updates on the geotech data that's been discussed in the past. Maybe Joel can touch on that. And then also on the conversations with Concom. Do you want to bring everyone up to speed on those, or?
The geotech, we retained a peer review of that. They were using the information that done from the warnings that were commissioned in November. So their first review of it, they said they can come to a conclusion that because we're using piles for the foundations and the piles bear on solid soil that's, let me back up, the site's a glacial site. When the glacial deposits recessed, it left a lot of loose soil on the site. And it's called unconsolidated because it's there when the glacier recessed, as opposed when the glacier came down, the glacier would sit on the stuff and create consolidated fill. So because we're on the trail of the glacier, it's unconsolidated, which means it's soft and it can settle irregularly. So they're drilling through that unconsolidated soil 8, 9, 10 feet to get to solid bearing surface. The peer review engineer said, if we're gonna do that, you don't have to remove all the soil that's unconsolidated, which the original engineer had said we needed to review. I think all of us in the structural engineer sort of agreed with the peer review. If your building's sitting on piles that go to solid strata, you don't need to remove the unconsolidated fill. That's a $340,000 plus or minus savings to the project. There's two other categories that we can't quite get to now because to do them would require new soil drilling, so it would have to happen in the design development phase. So it would be a cost savings that would happen in the future if it happens. But we can't count on it now, and that is to reduce the number of piles. So there's some 300 piles, could we bring those down to 200? And not everybody does piles anymore. We haven't done a pile project in quite a while. Everything's done called ground improvement, which is other forms of creating stabilized surfaces within this type of a field. It's not clear that we can go in that direction, so I don't really want to put that into the cost savings formula right now, but it is something that we would be pursuing again. But the $340,000 savings isn't bad to start off with, so that's where we're at. And the other two will have to just defer to the next phase, because quite frankly, it's another $15,000 to $20,000 to do the soil borings, and no one has that budget.
So the last discussion we had about this was to support the building on piles, but the slabs, the floor slabs, the first floor slab, in areas which were not highly loaded, soil bearing slab.
He doesn't recommend that.
Doesn't even
because
proof rolling it and stuff like that.
you can't get it. The danger is always that one side settles a little bit different over time, and follow that kind of thing. There is a project going on now that exactly this has happened. It happens to be 600 feet tall, and it's a problem. So they don't really feel they can proof roll. They can't surcharge and guarantee that there won't be any differential settlement, but the slab is really tied to the footings and piles. In the future, if we can go to a different ground improvement system, there may be ways to simplify that, but right now they are not doing that. What the structural slab does for us is allows the pipes to be attached to the bottom side of the slab.
Yes.
And then those pipes aren't going to settle and crack, which is what the other thing that usually happens on this kind of site. So
We got the drawings for the rink.
Yes.
And they don't have pile support.
they do not
slabs.
have piles.
They have pile supported structure, but the slab itself is slab on grade.
Yeah.
There's no reason to think that the existing soils, although they're loose, are going to move if you don't add any load to them. But we just need to listen to the geotechnical engineers on that. In my experience, no reason to settle. All right, it is a glacial outwash site, and those are treacherous in a way, but since they did it successfully at the rink, and it's, must be the same soil, or similar.
Well,
soil.
it may not be the same soil because you are much more remote from the wetland at the rink, and so the soil composition and the organics. I don't have the
Yeah.
soil borings for the rink,
We don't have soil. borings.
and
They probably didn't do soil borings.
Sorry?
Probably didn't do soil borings.
They might not.
1994 site.
They might not.
The Sims Mani.
Basically that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's just big money here, big money involved with what we do here. It's not like it's talking about.
I'm aware of that, but I think that the last thing you want to do is have your gym floor cracking
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
other things. And so we're now on our second geotechnical engineer to try to answer these questions. And I think they're saying they'd like to maintain for now the structural slabs, but we can maintain the fills. We don't have to proof roll the site.
Yeah,
So doing the piles and removing of unsuitables, it's not required, so we have savings there. The concept of like preloading the site and consolidating the site doesn't sound like that's on the table at all.
It's not on the table because you need a tremendous area for that between the building and the parking lot. And that takes another year or so to, you're really compressing you need the weight of the. So then you also have to come up with the fill to put on the site to do the.
Yep.
So it didn't seem like a good option.
Okay.
I was surprised the piles weren't crazy expensive on the cost estimate. I mean, the foundation was expensive, but it wasn't what I thought it was gonna be.
Was there only short piles, 12 feet deep?
Up there at 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of surcharging, the way to do surcharging is to use the weight of the atmosphere. You put a blanket, permeable blanket over the side, and then you put pumps from the ground and you suck out the air that's in the ground, and you're using the weight of the atmosphere to push it down. That's the way you do surcharging these days. Okay, I don't think we're gonna do that.
So I wanted to commend Joel for getting that peer review quickly. You know, that wasn't something that was in, the initial budget. That was helpful to get that feedback. I know we had some second thoughts about the structural system, whether that was overkill, and I think that was great to get that returned quickly and be able to help us as we go through now and setting the budget. And those other things, will continue to be discussed as we go through DD and, we finalize those design decisions. I don't know if you want to talk about the other update from Concom or
Does Jenna want to?
Oh, sure. I would
I'm
love
happy
to.
to do it, but.
Let me see if I can pull up the site too, because that might be really helpful to start that conversation. How many windows? On one. Instead of twenty. All right, yeah. Okay. Oh, it's not moving on the screen. Let's see. Okay, let me stop sharing and try it again.
Maybe I can just start while you're going.
Oh, sorry.
In the master plan, we had a trail that went around the site that was to be part of the overall picture. It wasn't necessarily part of recount, but along with pickleball and the other features, we were showing the opportunities of the site. That wasn't envisioned, but when we went to Concom, they liked the trail and they thought that that should be included as a mitigation factor for the project and the mitigation is because there's this zone between the brown line and the yellow line that runs through pickleball. It's a buildable area. You're allowed to build in that, but you are taking down trees that were in the buffer zone. And the Reading Conservation Commission prefers that the trees that are taken out of this buffer zone be replaced. You can do it in a number of ways. You can donate land that's elsewhere to the cause, so the town's willing to contribute the wetland area that's behind our site and not buildable. You can pay for trees, or there can be other mitigation. And so the second point of mitigation was that Concom would like to build this path because it encourages use of this area in a passive way. Now, how that's funded, maybe you can take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So we saw the cost as a team for the pathway, and it was a nice chunk of change in our opinion as a team, 645,000. So we met internally, engineering, recreation, myself, Jane. So, and obviously Chuck from conservation, and Chuck has done several volunteer projects where they have built and funded the boardwalk portion, and he feels extremely confident that conservation would be able to fund this part right here. I'm
The
on
brown
the
is the
screen.
wood.
Yep.
And what's not brown is stone dust, which is at grade. This is bridging the grade because there's either topography or wetlands below it. And so the wetlands flow under this portion, but this is at grade, then it goes under here. And then from there over, it's at grade.
Yeah, so that savings alone was pretty significant. So with them being able to do that, it brought the cost of the walking, the whole walking path, including the boardwalk, to 200,000 instead of 645.
Just part of that cost of the 200 is the civil engineer and the landscape architects have to design the entire path because it does have to meet accessibility requirements. And this is not that easy to design because you need a lot of topography. So the surveyor has to go back and survey this path in detail. And then that part is on piles because the boardwalk won't sit. Now they have mini helical piles. They look like a corkscrew, a little bit bigger than your wine bottle, but they are mini corkscrew type piles that would go in and support that. But that engineering is a significant cost and was in that 200,000.
Yeah, that was something that we looked at when we were going through the cost estimates and reconciliation as well. The costs for those piles were quite large, so that's why we have quite a bit of savings. So this is just the process that we're going through, having these initial discussions with Conservation Commission, trying to find a good balance. You know, it's not done yet, but you know, we continue to make progress. And at this point, I think the understanding is as we get to the budget that, you know, we should carry costs for that walkway, should that be required. But we'll still continue to have our discussions as we move forward. So I think that's everything for the design section.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna and Phil. It's excellent.
Thank you. And we wanted to get into.
$500,000 right there. That was a $500,000 conversation. Not many else picked up on that. Actually, more. It's more like 750.
Keep talking.
Be free pretty soon. So for our update on sustainability, we had a meeting today with the working group to circle back on the various options that were explored during the cost estimating phase and how we want to move forward with that. And yeah, I guess I'll just turn it over to Dan. Is Ari?
Dan's on.
Oh, and Ari's on.
I'm on as well. I'm on Zoom, so I can chime in if needed. This is Ari.
So maybe if we could just quickly go through the highlights of what was discussed today. and then move into the feedback from the working group to the permanent building committee on these items that are up for consideration as options. You know, that would either get added to or not get added to our budget.
After the sustainability, if we could do John Wood, he can weigh in on the VRF discussion, and then he doesn't have to sit through with most of us.
Yep.
Okay, so, good evening. So today, we presented some, the energy alternatives, or rather, based on what the cost alternatives are, specifically alternative 3A, 3B, 4A, 4B, and I'll go very quickly into what those designations are. As the building committee has seen, sort of the current cost estimate, so you know what those costs are. What I like to do is to sort of quickly go through what those implications mean. And so I can pull up a screen here, if you bear with me for 1 second. Let me know if you can or you cannot see it.
We got it.
Okay, so we, as you know, we don't currently have a energy model for this at this early stage. However, we do have experience with at BH+A with similar project types, similar project size, and similar project program that is currently under construction, that we have energy models. And so what we're doing here is essentially a benchmarking of what the a building anticipated for retail would have used in terms of the energy profile. As you recall, we discussed the energy use intensity as sort of a catch-all for the energy profile of the building. Today, the baseline, we started with a baseline stretch code meeting the ASHRAE 90.1 2019, which is today's stretch code in Massachusetts. That we yield a energy use intensity EUI value of 53. A EUI value of 53 translates to around 440,000 kilowatt an hour year annual use. Again, these are sort of extracted out of the energy model, and so and eventually these numbers will be sort of backed up by actual energy model when we do get to that stage. However, this sort of gives you a scale magnitude in terms of what these alternatives mean and how much they roughly save in terms of energy. And so with the electric rate, and it's also, you know, that Reading has a lower electric rate of 0.185. And when that translates effectively to around $81,000 of energy cost. And what I'm saying here is this is a theoretical based building meeting the energy code. The next line item is what is being provided in your cost estimate, which is what we call the baseline, which essentially uses an all electric heating and cooling, in this case, and VRF, centralized VRF system with electric domestic hot water. And again, based on our sort of benchmarking of previous energy code, you can sort of expect roughly a 28% reduction from the sort of model code, this theoretical number. And that translates to around $58,000 of energy cost over annually. And so that in itself then serves as the baseline to compare the two, or in fact, the four alternatives that you have. Add alternative 3A, which is a VRF hybrid system. And without going into too much detail, and essentially it's a VRF system. However, from the outside units to sort of the indoor central location, from the indoor central location to the terminal points, those are water instead of compressed pressurized refrigerant. So there's the energy profile is roughly the same. And at and so you are still looking at a 28% savings compared to a model, theoretical model building. However, compared to as priced building, there's really no sort of savings because you're operating at the same sort of energy profile. And the cost estimate was that there's a premium of approximately 496,000. This is a total cost premium to go into the VRF hybrid system. The VRF hybrid system is both the equipment are more expensive as well as the water piping are more expensive. And that sort of contributes to this added cost. Add alternate 3B, which is a 4-pipe hydronic system. And in this case, it's entirely a water distribution system. However, we are still using, as there's no gas to the project, what was described in the add alternate 3B in the cost model is a electrified chill or electrified chiller heat pump. So essentially, the heating and cooling is still provided by electricity with the electric water for backup, and that is because the electric chiller is not as efficient as a VRF system, and so for heating, the narrative included a small backup system. That, I think, again, these extrapolated values are around 40 energy use intensities. That, I think, actually will be a little less efficient than the VRF hybrid or the VRF system. And that additional cost, and as you can imagine, that the 4-pipe hydronic system for all distribution to the terminal units to the outdoor units is about $1.1 million of the total cost premium. These are value. I mean, they are, I think, sort of pros and cons of each of these systems, obviously, and we can go into that. And that's something that we also discussed at the sustainability workshop today. And then the next sort of 3 values or 2 values really is I don't have a breakout, was just adding the roof insulations that we put in. So as an option or alternative for A, for example, we increase the wall R value, essentially increasing the insulation value. And in this scenario, again, based on the benchmarking from very similar energy model, the increasing the R value of the walls, triple glazing of the window, essentially decreasing the U value of the window assembly, yielded roughly about $3,000 of savings, and that's compared to the baseline of the electric system, not sort of the model system. So essentially, what we're saying is that there's about around a 10,000 kilowatt hour savings per, and I'm sorry, less than that, and roughly a 3% sort of savings to go into increasing the R values and making a triple glazing, and then a simple payback sort of in years. And again, I think there are some caveats to this approach, but I just wanted to give you a sense, or to the working group, a sense of magnitude, is that the total cost of increasing the R value to 45 using triple glazing was a total cost was $189,000. And that divides simply by the savings per year gives you a payback of 61 years. And I realize that simply looking at the math may not, you may say, well, 61 years, that's not, it's not really worth doing it. But the energy value or the envelope, increasing the envelope efficiency is probably one of the most impactful, and that's the impactful element to sort of achieving the energy goals and reducing energy cost in the long run. So it may not appear immediately that the payback is worth it, but this is something that should be considered. In addition, we specifically took out the air infiltration to passive house standard, and this is meeting a certain value. And the reason we pulled this out is because this is a single entity that actually does impact or have the largest impact in terms of achieving or reducing the energy usage intensity. And this bears out in our energy models with the Newton Senior Centers that we did. And you can see here that there's a 4 value or 4 drop on the EUIs, and that sort of yields to about $9,000 of savings. Again, the saving themselves is not that large because the base model that we're starting with is a very efficient building to begin with. And this is, again, the total premium cost is an estimated cost that from other project benchmarking. Again, we don't have the actual energy model for this, but and this sort of has around the 22-year payback with that wall assembly. And finally, the question is how much would it, what it means to meet passive house for this project. Meeting passive house means including certification and all the other sort of associated costs that comes with a passive house is sort of increases the savings to around 12,000 per year. Again, this is compared to the all electric base model, which again is already highly efficient to begin with. And so, and that again, estimated premium is around $250,000, and that sort of gets you a payback over 20 years. And we're using these benchmarkings based on what we've been sort of discussing in our energy models and energy consultants and passive house consultants. Generally, a passive house could be anywhere between a 2, 3, 4% sort of premium in terms of in terms of the going from a project that meets stretch code to a passive house project. And so when you add these 3 values together, it adds up to around $600,000, and that bears out to that percentage as well. So in order to do passive house, you wouldn't have to do all 3 of these as mandatory. So,
But hey, Dan.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that if the permanent building committee prefers, they could do the windows without doing the wall?
That is correct. You can go to a 0.22 triple glazing window, which I believe has a total project cost of $74,000 in the alternate for, I think this was alternate for B or
5.
Yeah, sorry, 5.
Sorry,
there's so many alternates.
Just one more interruption. The footnote to that is that triple glazed windows are more efficient from a sound attenuation perspective. So you get better energy and you get a quieter building. If you were really worried about the quieter building, you really only have to put the windows on the west side of the building, the side that faces pickleball. You don't necessarily have to do the whole building from an acoustic perspective. So there's a nuance there that you can do roughly half the windows on the building. If it was just a sound issue that we're worried about.
So if I could just reiterate a bit of what Dan said and just try to help some context, a lot of data and very, very valuable data. So again, we're here to set the budget for this project. We've talked about some different options that are considered. They have price tags associated with that. And your job as the permanent building committee is to make a recommendation ultimately that the select board and finance committee will support in the town relative to what the project budget should be for this particular project. So these are decisions that we need to make. As we've discussed in the past, we don't have an energy model at this stage of the project, which is most helpful for making those decisions. But we have a lot of very good information. And what Dan was presenting now is really even a step up to what we had in the past, because drawing from a previous project with a very similar type of building, it's not exactly the same, but we can take the information from that energy model and say, okay, what can we really expect? So that's what we're looking at in those numbers. And they tell us basically 2 categories of things. One is the HVAC system. What do we do about that? What do we do about the insulation?
So just on that, John is on the line, the HVAC engineer, because John Code that said, what's the engineer's recommendation on the VRF four pipe and that? So if you want to hear that, we can, for what it's worth.
Yeah, so I'd just like to set the stage and then hear the questions that John and Dan can answer from the committee. So
7 o'clock, we've been here an hour.
So
Talk.
on the HVAC side, what you saw.
Just to add a little color to what Brian mentioned. So tonight, what we want to do is establish a budget and establish some of these alternates that are going to be within that budget. It's not final. There'll be further cost estimates, probably at the end of design development, and then at least one during the construction documents. You've got a very volatile market right now. We might see conditions get better or worse. We've got escalation and things baked into this estimate. We've got contingencies baked into this estimate. So as we go through this process, we may find that we're coming in under budget and something we don't pick tonight can get added. We may also find that costs are escalating faster than we thought, and something we pick tonight has to come out of the estimate. Certain things like the HVAC system in the walls, they're a little more difficult to take in and out from a design perspective because you're designing around those. Something like the roof PV system is a little easier added on at the end or taken away at the end. But just remembering that we're trying to establish which of these we want to define the budget that we go to select board, FinCom, town meeting, town with. But it's not everything, like it's not cast in stone tonight. Like we can never go backwards from this point.
Right, so ultimately, what are we gonna set as part of the scope of this project moving forward? And what are we gonna allocate to, if the money is available, those are gonna be our alternates. So Dan, can you bring up that screen real quick again, just with those numbers? So on the top, you had the HVAC figures. So as Dan said, with the current codes that we're designing, we're already designing a very efficient building, right? Those codes have been increasing, over the last few years. So we're starting out with a really high level. And that's why when we look at these differences, we're not really seeing much of a savings. But we are seeing a lot of extra costs because it's a different type of system. And it's also something that maybe isn't as widely used in buildings today. That also will affect bid prices. So that's not really factored into this, but that's another thing that really does matter, when you go to bid. So that's kind of a basic understanding of those HVAC. Those are the first 4 items. And then when we get to the envelope, again, we're starting out with already a very tight envelope, but there are ways to make it even tighter if we want. I think the key about that is that if you were to do that, this is the time to do that. You don't really do that later on in the building. You do it during the construction. But with those, there's not really significant savings because it's already a pretty tight building. But there are some additional costs. So that's kind of a general overview. And I think it'd be good to kind of open it up to the permanent building
We just have
committee.
John weigh in on the VRF.
Yep,
I
okay.
read it, I don't know if Joe has any comments, because he's the one that brought that system up.
Well, we have a VRF system over at the Reading Public Library. We have not, like, we've mentioned this several times, have not had good luck with it at all. Refrigerant leaks, compressor failures. Spent a lot of money over at that building up and running. And I know we're not really going with, we have a Daikin system over there, over at the library. This will probably be Mitsubishi. I'm hearing maybe we'll have better success, but based on what we've been through for the last 9 years, right, 16. It hasn't, I'm sure the library staff would chime in on that too. So that's where we stand on that type of system.
Yeah, and I can just kind of a personal note from other projects, I can concur with, what Joe's saying, we don't see it very often, but we do see some of those problems happening. I had a project recently that had refrigerant leak, and, the owner has a big repair bill as a result of that. So that's because the refrigerant is very expensive. Also, checking for the leaks can be time consuming because you've got to set up your test, come back, so there's more labor than just going and replacing something. So that can add to the repair bill, but at the same time, you know, the premium is also significant to make that cost up front now versus are we gonna have problems like that down the road? So that's something to.
The first premium is still a VRF system. It's just that it's water as opposed to refrigerant, so it doesn't necessarily solve, it solves the refrigerant replacement.
Yeah.
issue, but it doesn't. It's exactly the same piping system.
Well, some of it is, some of it's water, some of it's
A
refrigerant.
water leak is easier to find than a refrigerant leak, though, generally speaking.
It could be, our clients claim that you can see the refrigerant because it's usually colored yellow, the glycol.
The problem is with it, by the time we get there, the refrigerant's long gone, so then it's like we gotta pump it up with nitrogen or something else to find the leak.
I mean, I wish it was not a Daikin system. Daikin is known not to be a good system. And we don't, if it's not allowed on our projects, we exclude it. There's no question about it. I wish you did that.
So John, do you want to jump in to sort of explain some of the recommendations that you have here?
I guess I don't really have much to say in terms of recommendations. As has been discussed in this and other meetings, there's lots of selection criteria for going with a system. You know, cost, maintenance issues, things like that.
Well, maybe you can touch
One
on
of the other factors.
the VRF hybrid system, just, you know, what's the pros and cons there?
Sure. Well, the VRF hybrid system, the main pro of that is having less refrigerant. I believe one of the reasons that they developed it was because of concerns about refrigerant leaks and safety associated with that. So they developed this system that has refrigerant between the outside unit and the indoor distribution box. So you do have one run of refrigerant, but then all the distribution within the building is water piping. So as was talked about, it's easier to find leaks. There's no danger of refrigerant leaking all into one small room or something like that. Unfortunately, the cost of that system is significantly higher. We got some pricing from Mitsubishi about that to confirm that. But it is an option that addresses some of the concerns.
And then because of the size of the building, if we go back to a VRF system to address the sort of leak detection as an item, they were potentially rather looking at a VRF system. Currently, what's priced is a centralized VRF system in that the entire VRF system is on two or three outdoor units. The gym is served by one unit or a dedicated unit that's and then the rest of the building is on two outdoor VRF systems, and then potentially a multi-function space is on a separate again another system. But if there may be a way to look at a VRF system where it's a decentralized system because the building is not, we don't have a massive building. Maybe there are smaller systems that you can put into these spaces. One unit serves 4 or 5 rooms or so on. And that's something that we've been also discussing this afternoon in the working group. Essentially looking at potentials to sort of look at ways to make that the RF system not so or easier to maintain. We know it's not a hands-off system as it claims. There are issues in terms of using a VRF system. There are cons in the decentralized way, which complicates controls, for example, of the buildings, because now you have several systems or several smaller systems instead of one larger centralized system. But again, I just want to put it out there that you're not stuck with just a centralized VRF system.
So I have a question for John. You know, I recall on some other projects that there was maybe improved efficiency with more of a decentralized system in terms of operating energy costs, because the VRF systems are better if they're kind of operating at full capacity. And then so if you have more of a decentralized system, you could have one running, and then if you need more, then the second one comes on, that type of thing. Is that something that would be factored into this or not?
That could be what Dan's talking about is kind of a decentralized system would be having a series of smaller systems instead of having, well, right now we have it set up with 2 large systems. What you might be talking about is the large systems have multiple stages to them. For example, one of them has 4 compressors, I think. So it does stage, which improves its efficiency. One of the other efficiency factors for the larger systems is that when the building in the spring or in the fall has some cooling needs and heating needs at the same time, it can move the heat around the building, saving energy that way and improving the efficiency of the overall operation.
Okay.
So instead of generating heat, they'll take the heat off the south side of the building and push it into the north, push the cold air from the north rooms into the south. And so you don't really use energy, you're just transferring the energy around the building. That's the advantage of the centralized system, which is what just historically as we've been using.
Joe, at the library, if you lose refrigerant, do you lose it for the whole building, or are there several different systems where you only lose it from one small system?
Several different systems.
So you don't lose it for the whole building?
Now, this last issue that we had caused us to lose the second floor, which was partly because of the way it was piped, but I mean, it's the nature of the system. And then once we found the leak, we were able to isolate it. It was just one evap coil that we found.
I'm just wondering if what they're suggesting is that decentralized systems would be better in terms of
The
loss of
the
refrigerant.
centralized system goes to a controller,
Yeah.
like a computer hub. So the refrigerant going to the cassette with the centralized system is only going from the controller to the room. So the controller might be in the hallway. There's a pipe that goes from the hallway to here and back. So that's the refrigerant you can lose out of that unit. There are 8 other units coming off that same controller, but they're isolated. There's a firewall
That's
between
what
them.
it is, isolated, yeah.
But you know.
Yeah.
You won't lose the whole building. You'll lose that one cassette.
I mean, it seems to me that there's a huge premium for going for the one which has the water distribution. And one of the facts we have to keep in mind is every time you add money to the job, you lose votes, right? We don't want to load this job up with so much
Exactly,
cost
yeah.
that the voters turn it down. Then all of this is academic. So my view is that we should be going. We shouldn't worry too much about operating costs. People don't understand that. I think it was Wimpy said to Popeye, you know, I will gladly pay you next Tuesday for the hamburger you give me today. And you know, people, the voters are ready to look at the initial cost. Try to persuade them to increase the initial cost because we're going to save money 25 years down the road. I don't think people's minds work that way.
I think that's Dan's point on the wall system, that you go for 2 more inches of insulation, you don't get that much return because the base system is pretty darn
Yes,
efficient.
that's my thing. I think, you know, my view is we should go for the cheapest building we can get because that's the way we can maximize our chance of the building being built. That's job one.
So I think we'll change that to cost effective, opposed to cheap. And I agree that we should be building a cost-effective building and we should be good stewards of the town's money. But at the same time, we only have one chance to do this, and we want to do it right. And we're gonna do another senior center 50 years from now, town is, so we do need to do it right. Take these things into consideration. And believe me, if you read the comments I put on the drawings, you'd know that I'm an advocate for cost effectiveness. But we do need to consider the, long-term maintenance of the building. I'd like to hear what Ari thinks about these.
Same thing. I think we should hear from Ari, to represent that working group and just kind of. Provide some
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think what everyone has said in unison, if I can summarize this, and this is what I agree with, is that at the end of the day, let's speak first on the mechanical systems. The tool needed to decide between these mechanical systems is not the simple payback. This was definitely helpful to see, right? To see the first cost premium versus the energy savings. And the energy savings particularly between the mechanical systems are negligible, right? So at this point, the difference between them is somewhat qualitative in that we're talking about future maintenance. I'm particularly interested in future replacement costs. It's something that doesn't get discussed a lot with VRF, is the sort of obsolescence at the end of the system's 15 to 20-year lifespan. And so that's why I thought it was particularly useful to consider the 4-pipe hydronic, heat pump chiller concept, was that it's a much larger portion of the system gets reused at the equipment's life. So what we're left with here is two different systems, one of which is the least expensive and the obvious choice, for lack of a better term, for a building like this, which is VRF. That's what most engineers would choose. It's why it was the base. It's a extremely efficient system. It's very cost effective. Compared to a system with either a $500,000 or $1 million premium that offers potentially better maintenance benefits. Normally we would compare them in a life cycle cost analysis to show over time, but that process requires us to agree as a group that we care about the life cycle cost, which is kind of the opposite of what John just said. And it's not necessarily how everyone chooses to look at a project. It's what my preference would be, and I think it is a compelling argument to the town, but it's true that most voters are probably going to say, I don't care about that, right? By that point, it won't be my taxes at risk. So I think it's tough to make that choice. I'm again particularly concerned. I think that, in my opinion, the hybrid VRF system still has a lot of challenges in that the entire system is still proprietary. Like, it's all Mitsubishi. The fan coil units have water in them, but they're still, if that system isn't supported in the long-term future, that may be a challenge as well. So I think, in summary, a good way to go about this is at this point, is to recognize we don't have the budget to put all the alternates in, but there's clearly some benefit in keeping the option open. So what I would argue is we should hold call it a fund that could support the addition of one or more of these alternates later down the road once we've got better information to choose between them. But I wouldn't suggest simply saying we don't need any of them. At the end of the day, if we're not able to include any of them, I think we'll all sleep pretty easy that it's still a good building in terms of efficiency. With the one thing that'll probably be in the back of people's minds is what happens if there's a leak or a compressor failure on the VRF. It's $1 million to solve that issue. Other than that, I think that's really the biggest one. I think we would decide now is that refrigerant or not issue.
I think that was a good summary of the issues, Ari. So I guess what I'd like to do is, first of all, see if there are any more technical related questions related to these systems, separating out the cost. And then if they're not, move into looking at the project budget, looking at these options, which we need to make decisions on. And then going through that process of prioritization to ultimately end up at which items are going to be included in the base, which ones are going to be included if the money is available as alternates, and then, kind of a rough priority for now. And that can also change as we go through the process. Like once we do the life cycle analysis and energy models, we might have some slightly different data, and maybe something moves around a bit. But the key now is that we establish that base budget that we can take to the select board and FinCom for approval. And we establish the base scope of work that the architects and engineers will need to design. So are there any technical questions or comments about these systems before we move into the more of the financial aspect of it? So, so again, our goal is to put together, the budget for this project. So in your email, I think last week, we sent out a draft version of a project budget. And all the costs that we believe are likely to be incurred on the project, as well as appropriate contingencies for the various factors. So that kind of forms a starting basis. However, I think before we look at what those numbers are, it's also important to put this into perspective. So when we started on this project, we started initially planning, then we went through the feasibility stage. The feasibility stage is when we had the first rough costs on what we thought the project would be. At that point, in the feasibility study, we had a number of 28.3 million, including the pickleball and the pathways.
Didn't include pickleball.
The 28.3 did not include the pickleball. Okay, my mistake on that.
And didn't include the path either. There was pickleball was taken out because that was the only site that could support pickleball. So we dropped the pickleball out.
Okay, I'll rely on you for that. It's different than what I had. So, but anyway, so the 28.3 million, and at the time we had a building of 26,300 square feet. So we actually have a bigger building now. We have over 2,000 square feet more that are added to the building. And the way the timeline has progressed, there was a little bit of a pause and kind of getting everything going again. So our construction time is also just a little bit off. You put all that together, and just going based on those numbers, we would, mostly the adjustment for the square footage, we would easily be over $30 million from that initial base. Well, that also kind of aligns with what was circulated, I think, in the town as far as what the expectation might be that this project costs. So that was kind of where we started, right? In addition to that, we looked at comparing projects in other communities and trying to create a benchmark by equalizing those projects relative to this project and when this project was going to be constructed. We looked at about a dozen different jobs. And when we pulled all that data together and tried to make more of an apples to apples comparison, there was a range. And that range was from 26.8 to 34.4 million. So a bigger range, but everything's a little different. But right in the middle is the $30 million mark. So you could kind of say that we were still looking at other projects around the $30 million mark. So we went to the select board at their last meeting and provided an update on the project, and they were wanting to know what we expected the project to come in at. And based on the data we had to date, I felt that we should be able to be under that $30 million mark. So I told them that I felt confident that we can keep it below that number. I think the $30 million is reasonable, but I think we can get lower. And my thought at that point was that, I would expect something around 28 million, something like that. So when we put together this project budget inclusive of all the costs, we actually ended up at 27.4 million. Plus the money that's been spent to date on feasibility and schematic design, which is roughly 350,000. And then in this budget, I had put it like a hold allocation of up to $1 million for things that might still want to be added. So that kind of gave us a range of a low number of 27.4 to a high number of 28.8. Based on the feedback that I've heard from within the town, like, I think we wouldn't really want to go higher, but you know, that's a decision, that's not mine to make, that's for the permanent building committee. But I think somewhere in there. So if we start with that low end of the number, the 27.4, we can look at the current decisions that are left on what was called the alternates and decide whether any of those should be added to this base project to establish the base scope of the work and the base project budget. Once we determine, you know, what gets added or what doesn't to that base, we can look at what's remaining and decide for those factors, which ones do we really, you know, we'd really like to have on this project if the money is available. And as we've discussed already earlier on, you know, we have contingencies in place for a lot of variables that are in flux now. We're going through the design process. There are variables in there. There are variables in the estimates. There are variables in inflation and what's happening in the construction market. So all those things are constantly changing. So our goal is to try to manage the project costs throughout the entire project. And in doing so, hopefully free up money in some of these contingency funds that, if the bids come in favorably, may be available to fund some additional items on the job.
I just clarify, the money that was funded at previous town meetings should be part of this budget.
Correct.
So you said you included in the budget the feasibility study and the other costs.
Yeah, we're gonna take it out.
So
I just want to make sure that the starting point doesn't have
no, the
300,000.
The 27.
Yeah, 27.4 is a starting point, but the data was provided to all of you on the PPC, so you have a full understanding of picture. So we included, and there was an explanation about those things along with the email. We included items that we did, you know, we put into the budget, and then we also listed items that we're not putting into the budget. Just so again, it's clear what's included and what's not. So we had distributed a list of, actually, maybe you could pull, yeah, maybe you could pull that up, Jenna. The most up-to-date version, we had 8 different items listed on here for consideration.
For consideration of additional
Yes,
monies to be spent.
yes.
And those additional monies came from the schematic assessment that the various groups did. Is that, where did those come from?
Where did these options come from?
Yeah.
They came from the design team through the evaluation process based on feedback that was received from the building committee and the work groups.
Or they came from the town, like the town generator. Do you want to make the building shelter?
Yeah, so let me just back up for just a second. So the design group, the sustainability group, as you explained, met, there was a workshop and you came up with this list of items. Was the same thing done for the design group? Did the design group meet in a workshop format to look at the items that came in? And, you know, and I'm seeing Marilyn shake her head, no.
So, yeah, so yes and no, let me, I guess, clarify. So yes, the design group went through the same process as the same.
No, but I'm talking about the workshop.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about, the working groups, right?
No, I'm talking about the you said that the sustainability group met yesterday
Yes,
as a workshop,
a working group.
a working.
They had their
group
regular scheduled meeting, actually today.
To come up with these alternatives.
No.
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 These alternatives were put on the table by the design team as things that we need to decide on. Some of them came from, for example, the stone dust path came from conservation. The generator came from the fire department, because we need to add a generator to the building based on the fire department's desire for it to be a shelter in place. So they came from different places. The sustainability design group discussed the various HVAC systems.
Okay. So I understand that, but so not all of the design group was involved in
Design
that.
stakeholder group hasn't met in a month in any way, shape. or
I think
Yeah.
where you're getting at is that the design changes that were suggested in the comments aren't changes that would change the budget. Because they're moving things from one
Can I
floor to
hold
the
you
other.
to that?
Pardon me?
Are we being recorded? So, so I can hold you to that. So even though they're not here on this piece of paper, they're
Right,
all.
you're
they're-
within the
they're-
volume of the building, and within the volume of the building were constant, so that's why they didn't have to be alternates. But the emergency generator that would provide an emergency power for the whole building, something you can choose to do or not choose, it's outside of the building, needs to come in. The path is outside of the building, needs to come in. And then our suspicion on the wall and things that Dan went into great depth was that people may ask about that, and we wanted to say, well, we have a very good building. The return on that necessarily isn't as significant as one might think, because you're starting it. We wanted to be able to prove the value of those or not have the value.
I understand, I get that, and those are very important things, and I understand why there's so much discussion on them. On the other hand, there were perhaps less expensive suggestions. And what I'm hearing Joel say is there are placeholders in the budget for those items. Or if not, who ultimately is making the decision? I'm gonna pick one, but I'm not gonna pick five. I'm gonna pick 1,
So,
5, and 6.
Yeah, so we went through this process throughout schematic design, taking feedback from the working groups and the permanent building committee and town groups. All of that information went to the designer. In addition to that, we went through a design review process where there was documentation of different ideas and questions and comments for the design team. They have the responses to those design comments prepared, and they went out today from the team. So in there's a whole.
No.
No, they went out tonight.
Okay, okay. I'm saying no, that we haven't received.
Yeah,
They're not all gonna be drawn because we have a whole nother phase.
Okay, okay.
So those were, I haven't seen them yet either, but they were being sent out today, so. So in there's, let's call it fine tuning of a lot of things. So some things might push the cost up a bit, some things might push the cost down a bit. Overall, within those comments, we feel like that scope of work is included in our base number. What we have here are high ticket price items that are individual things that are currently not included in that base number, but they're things that were important to the town, either for public safety, for an answer as to what kind of building are you getting me? You know, what are the operating costs? Are you providing me a quality building for the town? And then some things that had to do with the approval process, like with Conservation Commission. So those are the items that are on here that we need to decide as a permanent building committee. Do we authorize these items to be included in the base project budget? Or do we say, well, we're going to consider them if we have money available when bids come in?
Okay, that puts it into perspective.
You know,
Um,
I'd be happy to sit with you and show you everything you asked for, the dividing curtain,
Yeah,
the dividing wall in the multi-purpose room, the floor and the fitness, floor and the,
yeah.
all in. It's all in already.
Yeah, so
All
some of
right.
those things we were discussing during the cost estimating or reconciliation process,
Yeah.
looking at the estimates.
And that's great. That's what we want to hear.
And we'd be happy
So-
to get you assurance on that by walking through it.
That would.
But we
be
have a meeting
wonderful.
tomorrow, right?
Right.
I don't have time to go through that 15 pages of comments.
A question, so this
Doesn't sound like I got any of my comments.
listed as alternate one, I thought I understood that the extension of Simon's Way is actually in the base.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's.
That came out of the dirt meeting,
Alternate here.
and so we incorporated it.
Okay.
Is that extension, it was described as to the second entrance,
Second entry to the parking lot.
but the drawing shows it going beyond that.
Now
up to the
that,
end.
that, there was a line there, that was his third alternate. That's being picked up in the pickleball estimate that'll be
Okay,
back in
that was the
another
confusion
week.
I had.
Yeah,
So it's just up to the second.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's just make sure that everyone's clear of what these alternates are.
So we
So,
can just go through and pick them. And I think in the interest of time, people some.
well, I want to make sure that people understand. So like you can see them up there on the screen. Number one is included in the base cost already. Okay, that's the road extension. We have the propane generator or a diesel generator. We have the 3A and 3B, which are the HVAC options that were just discussed earlier. 4A and 4B are additional insulation options. 5 is the windows, like Joel was pointing out earlier, that there's also a benefit from the sound, so that's listed separate. Number 6 would be to add solar panels to the roof. Number 7A is, it's still on there, but I think that's not something we're really planning on doing right now. But 7B is something that we've heard from the town that we should be carrying at this point, since we're still in discussions with Conservation Commission, and this is something that they're hoping for. And then number 8 is probably something we want to include, since there's significant cost savings. And that was what Joel described earlier with the updated report from Geotech, where we won't need to remove all the soils. So let's begin with looking at which items we want to include in the base cost. So clearly, 1, that's already included, right, in our project costs.
so just to clarify, you gave us a total project budget of 28,813,735.
27.4 is the base number for what additional money will need to be provided by the town to fund the project.
Before these alternates.
Right.
The number you're looking at had a.
No, I've got the million. It's 28,813,735.
Okay, so that includes
1 million
million.
for alternates and includes 347,500 in
Correct.
previous.
So once you
costs.
deduct those two,
You
that
get to the
puts you at
27.
27.4.
So in that number, the 27.4, the 28.8, that gets the extension of Range Road to the end of sort of the limit of work between the senior center and pickleball.
Correct.
But it's not the full extension along pickleball. That would be part of the pickleball project.
It's an alternate to pickleball, actually, because you may not need it if they want to park on the other side of Burbank Arena.
Okay,
All right, so that one's included. I'm guessing we're including number 8 in the base, right? Because that would reduce the price.
yep.
Okay, so that one we'll go ahead and include. And then, we talked about the trail and the discussions with the Conservation Commission, and the recommendation from the town is to carry the $200,000 for the Stone Dust Trail at this point, and we'll continue conversations and see what we can work out. So is there any exception to not including that in the base?
We're starting at the bottom of the table and going up.
Well, I'm just pulling out the ones that I think will.
I don't think we have a choice on the 200.
Yeah, I think we have to.
And if it's not that, we're gonna have to do something else that's gonna cost money.
And I'm assuming that the generator we have to include too. Is that correct? That's something that.
That's something that the town has asked for.
Yeah, if the town
Hey,
has asked for it, why wouldn't the town pay for it?
We are the town.
Well,
It's,
Left pocket or right pocket?
Well, I mean, it's not right pocket, left pocket. One is override money or debt exclusion money. The other one is regular money out of operating budget, subject to the 2.5%. Barbara Anderson's cap, right? And they are very different monies. One increases taxes, the other one doesn't increase taxes because it's capped at 2.5%. So it's a very different pot of money.
Well,
And
So I
think-
see this as the exact same thing as the Stone Dust Trail. In that we're building a building. In order to build the building, we need to do certain things. We need to install a sprinkler system because code requires us to. We also need to do certain things that certain authorities have in jurisdiction, i.e. the fire department, and certain entities like the Conservation Commission are going to require us to do. And those are all, I would say, project costs, not operating costs. So in one instance, the Conservation Commission is suggesting, forcing, implying that we put a path in that we need to add 200,000. And the fire department is strongly suggesting that if we build a building, just like we're gonna do with Killam, that we make it a shelter in place, which means we have a commercial kitchen and a generator. Joel?
mention
Why?
one thing
Why
to
would you do
John's
that?
comment.
Right.
We have this in Westboro at the senior center, and it's in the warrant, but there are grants available that people are confident we can get. But you have to fund it up front in order to get the grant. So it's being made clear in that particular warrant article that it includes a generator that's of benefit to the town, but that is anticipated to be captured through a grant.
This is typical of government. You know, everybody wants something extra. You know, the fire department wants the shelter. Let it come out of their budget. Why do we have to burden Cal with something which is nothing to do with having people
It does have,
exercise
yeah.
and have community. It's pile on the money, and eventually it will get voted out.
Yeah, like, I think like Mark said, the money in some ways will come one way or the other, but the approval is different. It is a different number that goes before the voters. But if the fire department is paying for it out of their funds, which come from the town, or the project is paying for it out of those funds, which come from the town, it's coming from the same source.
No, it's not, it's not, that's my point. It comes from the same source, but not with the same amount of money people have to pay in their taxes. One is an increase in tax due to an debt exclusion. One is within town operating budget, which is capped at 2.5% per year. So that one, in order to pay $498,000, the town has to probably cut expenses somewhere else. That's the whole purpose of Proposition 2.5, to prevent this kind of escalation of town costs without any controls. I'm trying to put some controls in place, saying if you want to spend 496,000, whatever it is, on a generator, we already have an emergency generator in the project, right? It's just not sufficient to run the whole
No,
building.
there wouldn't be a generator if you didn't have this one.
Okay.
There must be an emergency generator to keep the lights going.
That might be Killam you think of.
No, not here. It's a low-rise building and not the occupancy. It's not a generator system.
Well, what is it? What do you have to keep the lights?
Packs.
Battery packs, okay, well, that's,
But there is another alternative, and what we did in Needham is the building is generator ready. And then when they can fund the generator, you can plug it into the bill.
Precisely,
That would be something you could,
precisely.
I'm not gonna come in on one side or the other, so, but there is an alternative.
That's my thing.
One thing to consider is to work that through, channels within town, I think, to see if they're open to support that, but if it needs to be constructed as part of this project, then I think it needs to be signed to the budget at this point.
I don't agree. I think we should not have it in the budget. We should tell the town, if you really want it, cough up the money. Or have it ready so that they can put it in later.
I think put it in later is something that we could explore. I don't think it would be appropriate to go to the voters and say, hey, we have a $25 million building for you. And meanwhile, in order to have this building exist, in order for it to get through all the approvals, there's another $3 million worth of stuff we're gonna have to do as a town that we're not telling you about. So I think including it, number one, I just think it's part of the building. Believe me, I don't want to pay for a road going to pickleball or anything that's outside the scope of this building and in this budget. But I think it's part of the building. And in order to get the building built, this is what it is. If you want to build this building in Reading, in this location, you need to do some things for conservation and you need to deal with the authority having jurisdiction who have made requests that it's part of the cost. Like, you don't have to do this if you're not doing the building.
And part of what we're doing in a sense is setting the priorities anyway. So you could say this is a very low priority. Let's fund it another way. Or you could say, this is really a requirement, which I think is kind of where Pat was coming around to, for this to be what we envision it to be. Therefore, we're going to assign it a high priority and put it right into this number. Or not.
And if/when both projects pass, could there be an elimination of the Killam emergency generator? Because that wouldn't be an emergency. People would probably prefer to use recal, especially when school's in session. So I don't know if maybe there could be cost savings there eventually.
There's a generator to kill them for a shelter.
Yeah, yes.
I think there's a generator in the budget, which is maybe not what we were thinking about. I think there's a generator in the budget and there was a similar alternate to increase the generator. For this.
So why did both buildings need to be a shelter in place when Killam's way bigger and it's probably a way better shelter? We could get rid of the commercial kitchen then too.
I agree.
But the commercial kitchen isn't just for the shelter, it's for the
Right.
programs of the senior center.
This is not a good location for shelter, realize that. This is next to wetlands, which is, if anything could go wrong, we're gonna have floods. So this building's gonna be underwater.
Well,
That's a totally different issue.
This is
It's not in the floodplain right now, but,
the conversation about whether or not we need to be a shelter in place is a conversation with the fire department. It's
but
not,
I don't think they have statutory authority to demand. Because if the building isn't built, there's no shelter in place.
the point is, we can debate whether or not it's needed all we want. And whether it should be in, and if we need it, if Killam goes through, but we're not the people that are gonna decide that. We know that the fire, right now, where we stand, the information we have is that if we build this building, we have to do this. So we can make a vote tonight, or we can take all this information and vote later to come up with a budget. We need to decide what we want to include for a budget. We cannot include this in the budget, but we just got to understand, if we don't include this in the budget and we go and we get $28 million or whatever it is, and as we go through the design process and the fire department says you have to do this, and we realize we have to do it, something else is coming out.
Not necessarily.
The other practicality is that you're gonna go in front of town meeting with this. To go in and say, okay, here's what we're proposing. And by the way, here's the asterisk list, really what we already know is gonna be required, that you're gonna have to fund separately. I would say that that's handicapping the opportunity to get this done. Say that you're complicating a process that doesn't need that complication.
Is this a requirement, though, of the fire department? It says on here, should recal be an emergency management shelter? Doesn't say that it's definitely gonna be an emergency, so I think personally, I mean, I think the idea of scoping it all in and then putting in the gas generator, if it's deemed an emergency shelter.
Yeah, we
If
did
it's
meet in
already
here too. They
deemed,
Discussed it being an emergency.
Let me ask
They
a
wanted that.
different question.
Right.
From the remaining items, so if we remove the generator for a moment, we have the choice of HVAC system, we have additional insulation, we have windows and the solar panels. Are any of those more important than the generator?
I don't think so.
I think the solar panels is more cost effective to do third party. Because they can get the tax credits that the town can't get, so. We have solar panels on our buildings, but they're never funded by the town in our experience.
Yeah, that has changed, but still, I would agree that that's out of all of these, that's probably the one that could be added on last, for many reasons.
I think the triple pane windows would be very beneficial because we're right next to the firing range. So extra noise control might not be a bad idea.
Not just on the west side.
Yeah, all around. Yeah.
West side, or we talk east side?
It's a relatively cost effective.
Cost effective way to do it, yeah.
Aside closer to the fire range.
Fire range is the east
Inside.
I said it wrong.
That's easy.
Yes.
It's a.
But I'd say all the way around.
I would do all the
Well,
windows.
aren't these windows though, do they not come from Europe?
It depends on which one we get, and that's why there was a range of values. Pella makes them, Marvin makes them,
Okay, as long as there can be source.
and
I might suggest that the reduced scope trail might not be as high as the generator, but it's probably close because it's satisfying a town requirement.
Okay. So, I think there was kind of a suggestion that this solar panels would be the lowest on the priority list. Does anyone object to that?
I would add a comment that, Ari, I owe you a call, but I think there's a really good reason to get in touch with RMLD on this topic. I'm in agreement, and there's a real good reason to get in touch with RMLD.
Yeah, I reached out to them today, to get some information on this, some other, operational issues, but, yes. So, okay, so let's move that one to the bottom of the list. So how about on the generator? Okay, we have a diesel generator or gas generator. Obviously wouldn't be doing both. Is there a preference, which generator is most appropriate for this project?
Because it's so close to the wetlands, I would suggest we do the propane gas generator. So there's no leaks or no potential for leaks. I would imagine conservation would probably ask for that as well.
No, propane, so.
But you can bury a
Propane includes an underground tank.
It'd be an underground tank.
Yeah.
So.
Joe and Kevin,
I would agree, propane, so we go.
Okay, so we can eliminate the 2B. That's not really an option. Okay, so we had some discussions about the HVAC system. So what's the general sense there? We had our base system that's included, which is a VRF system. Then there were two additional options. One with a hybrid, which was the refrigerant in the water, and then one which was all water with the hydronic fan coil system. And those additional options were at roughly 500,000 and roughly 1 million. So, between, let's just say between 3A and 3B, which would be the more likely choice for options?
Why would we consider any of those
Neither.
options? I don't think we got a recommendation from experts to consider those, did we?
It's just the maintenance cost, is that right, Joe, would be the issue with the full VRF?
Yeah. Not sure why we even considering these things.
Well, I think if you get the life cycle and the maintenance costs back, that's gonna tell us what we want.
I don't,
to
yeah,
do.
I don't think it's worth 1.1 million to go to 3C, 3B. And I don't think the $500,000 ad solves all the challenges we're trying to solve. So I don't think they're both this time worth adding. I think if they're both worth adding if the costs were lower. I wonder if under the premise of, I guess what I want to understand in what we're doing now is the intent to decide later that we could pull something back out and then reconsider ones that are lower on the priority. For example, are we saying the generator is something in the building that's a priority because we want it to be in the building, or that's a priority because we think it might be required, but if we can eliminate it from being required, would we rather have something else in? It's worth knowing in this decision process. I would say if we can eliminate a $400,000 generator, then we're a lot closer to including a better mechanical system in its place.
So
it's just something to think about as like what the default swap would be later on.
Yeah, so
prioritization.
I guess my thought is that we're still going to be going through energy evaluation during DD, right? We're going to be building an energy model, and we'll be able to have updated numbers on this, and we'll also have an updated cost estimate in DD. So what I'm kind of hearing now is that it doesn't seem to make sense to carry these numbers at this point, but it's something that we can still look at further in the DD if some of the other items change, or if these numbers change and we find that the overall life cycle costs are more beneficial.
I agree with that. I think that's a better way to evaluate. At this point, it's not the highest part. Shouldn't be the highest priority compared to other things on the list. But I think that if a couple of things change in priority, and if we can free up budget from other aspects of the project as the costs get firmer, then I think these should stay on the, keep in the bench form.
Okay, so maybe we relegate that to possibly later based on additional feedback on costs and overall costs and life cycle costs for these units.
And I think one of those that, that's not, there's only one thing that here that happened to be a deduct, but the conversation about the use of the kitchen, which I think a few people commented on in the design review, I want to make sure that issue gets evaluated further.
I think that involves a programmatic discussion, because I don't think everybody's heard the purposes of the kitchen and what it's doing in the building. So that might be a sustainability group to get them on the same understanding of why it's needed.
Sure.
Okay, so I guess I'm looking at this. We have a generator, we have insulation, we have windows, and then we agreed that the last one would be the solar panels.
Aren't we just picking the ones that we're gonna put in and we're not ranking them now, we're just gonna, here's what's in.
We want to know what's included, and then we want to know what we plan to have alternates for as we go forward.
I think it's too early to do.
It's too early to finalize them, but to know that these are things that we are going to be planning on looking at, and
I don't know if we have enough information to rank them. I think we should decide what's in, what's not in, we can hold, but I don't think ranking what's not in makes any sense at this point.
All right, let me make a suggestion. I'm gonna make a suggestion that we include the propane generator. We include the triple pane windows, and we include the 200,000 for the stone dust trail. If you take, and I'm working off the 28.8 number, if you also take the $340,000 savings on the soil, and you take out the $347,500 in the feasibility money that's not going to go into this, And then we have the $1 million on the table for the alternates. I would suggest we leave that in the budget, but we cut it down to 500,000. If you do all of that, so there's still some money there. So if we decide to do that hybrid BRF system, we gotta make a decision soon. This can't be like dragged out all the way through design development. It's gotta be right at the start, but we still have time to monkey with these things. We take a hard run at the fire department, but we have the propane generator in. We make all those adjustments, our budget is $28,339,235. Which is very much in line with the 28.3 feasibility study numbers that were bounced around in front of select board. And it shows that we're right in line. We've technically increased the building a little bit, but so technically the cost per square foot from feasibility to now has gone down a little marginally. But in a sense, we took the scope that came out of feasibility. It's coming out of schematic, the same scope and the same number, which I think is a good place to be.
My only comment would be selectmen that said 27.9 would be better than 28.1.
I agree.
Or actually, I think they said 29.9 would be better than 30.
Right, but I think that if we're so close to getting into 27, I think we should. It would make a huge
I made
difference.
myself a promise that I would not vote for this vote comes, because I'm a taxpayer as well, as we all. My limit is 28. Anything above 28, my vote is no. And I think, so please 27.9. That's just the personal. No, really, I'm serious.
Yeah, that's.
I would not vote for this over 20.
That's your.
I talked to other people and
Good.
they're saying the same thing.
Can I do one more thing, Pat? In your scenario, before you add the $500,000 lump sum for the future alternates, we do have a contingency, right? We have a fair number in the contingency for the project, don't we?
I would say we have a reasonable amount of contingency based on the stage of the project and upcoming unknown events, not even really factoring in significant changes that could happen.
And my point is that there's enough contingency, there's contingency built in for the unknowns of the project that I'm just concerned we're adding contingency on top of contingency. Because we already have there's $3.5 million of contingency still in the project.
Well, there's escalation and then there's contingency. I believe the owner's contingency and construction contingency was roughly like 1.8. Numbers here, yeah.
The escalation.
Right, and then we have the design and pricing contingency, and that really is something that we're kind of expecting to use up, right? So it's kind of baked in. We don't have to.
We don't know.
We don't have to, but when we look at this holistically, that's not a contingency that's like a future unknown what might happen. That's as we go through this design process and all these decisions are made, we're understanding that there are decisions that haven't been addressed yet that, will likely have a price tag. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. So generally speaking, I would say that that's something that if we used up that design and pricing contingency between now throughout the design process, we wouldn't put the project at risk. Does that make sense?
It's there to be used.
Yeah. One of the things I'd add about that design contingency, the estimates we have are based on drawings that aren't complete. So part of that contingency is for things that are part of the scope now, but the estimator doesn't see them because they're not there, because nobody's perfect. Because you're putting together a 20-something $1 million estimate of every piece of drywall, every piece of wood trim, but it's not all detailed. So there's a lot of assumptions baked in. So part of that contingency is just the admission of the estimate that we probably missed a couple things because we can't see everything because it's not all drawn. So it's not all just there to add stuff. Some of it will just get eaten up when they get into more details.
But the owner's contingency is there to add things in design, so there's 5%.
Yeah.
I will say the cost estimator has done all of our centers for active living, so he's got some ability to fill in the gaps.
Yep, agreed. If we take that out altogether, we're at $27,839,235 by my math. And I feel comfortable with the contingencies. We are heading into what may be a very volatile market in the next year. It could go, I mean, every year is, we say this every year, no one knows what escalation is, et cetera, et cetera. But, 25% tariffs on everything with steel, that's a lot to a building.
Yeah.
So, but
So just to go through the numbers that you were mentioning, Pat. So the beginning numbers, 27.4 million, that's 27,466,235. That's if we take the 28.8 and we subtract that hole that was in there for 1 million, that brings you down to 27.8. And then if you subtract the 347,000 that was already spent, that brings you to the 27,466,235. So once we add the trails to that.
does the 27,466, does that include the deduct for the soil?
No.
Okay, all right, I'm with you.
So then you add 200,000 for the trails, you deduct 340,000 for the soils, and that puts you at 27,326,235. So if there was, just negotiate a little bit, you could include the generator and still be below your threshold of, below 28 million, which, as Mark was pointing out, that might sit well with getting this approved with the select board.
I think you may have missed the triple pane windows in here.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that was not included.
Okay, so I think
So is that-
I didn't hear anybody object to that.
Okay, so that's
I think
a
everybody
priority.
agreed with it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So let me add that to that.
that was 74,000.
74,000.
So you come up with 27,839,235?
I just think if Pat gets up next Tuesday and says, we got this building and you're getting a little bit more square footage and the budget's less, the PVPC did a great job.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I
Your chair for life.
I also, there are also, I think, some back in the construction supervision costs. Surprised to see you are recommending full-time.
So that was
on
discussed.
site. I didn't think that was necessary for a job this size to get a full-time person.
Yeah, so that's determination that the PBC can make. Based on
I would
conversations.
think we need someone full-time on site.
Was that
I would think we would need someone full-time on site.
full-time, really?
Yeah.
For a job this size?
So one thing that, and I can just tell you, it's in our literature, but generally the funds that are paid for construction management during the construction phase end up paying for themselves compared to reductions in change orders, greater efficiencies.
All right, I'm just surprised it's not my experience.
Just
It's not always done, like in smaller jobs, sometimes we don't, but usually in those situations, you have someone from the town that's like kind of assigned as a project manager, and then between the two people, it's kind of covered.
Well, I can,
But we're establishing a budget. We're not necessarily voting on like the value of it. Like I don't want to belabor this, but we could not include the generator and not include the triple pane windows and just say we want to keep $500,000 for alternates. But that's just confusing things. We'll probably just stick with where we are. Do you know what I mean? That kind of leaves it open-ended, which that could represent the generator and the triple pane windows. It could also represent a hybrid VRF system. And we got to work those issues out.
I think I keep getting the questions about the pickleball and the rifle range, so I do think the 59,000 or whatever it is for the windows might be worth
74,000 is worth
putting
it,
in,
yeah.
just
Yeah.
because it keeps coming up and
Yeah.
it's a small number, but I agree with what you're doing with the generator, put that as a placeholder in the general contingency or general alternates fund.
So add the 74,000 and have a $500,000 budget. Add the 274,000, right, is that what we're saying? And the 500,000 is the placeholder for the generator or whatever.
So if we, I can send you the spreadsheet, Brian. If we hold 500,000 in the current $1 million line item for alternates. And we add 200,000 to the budget for the stone dust path, add 74,000 for the triple pane windows. Take out the 347,500 for the schematic, take out the 340 for the soils. Again, leave 500,000 for future alternates. We are at $27,900,235.
That's perfect.
Joe.
So just keep in mind that the senior center right now is a cooling and a warming center,
Right.
so.
Yeah,
Sorry, it's a cooling center in the summer during heat waves for a lot for the elderly. And then a warming center during blizzard or something like that.
Having a generator.
Like you're saying, the generator.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so then, you know, why not just?
I think it'll.
Yeah, generator.
They don't use the generator to warm and cool.
I'm
If
just,
there was no
if
power.
there was no power, you had it during a heat wave and you have no, it's happened
Keep saying
before.
if-
But it has happened.
Yes.
I don't know of any statutory requirement for.
Just a thought. I just wanted to throw it out there.
Can I make a suggestion?
Just remind about the
Yeah.
structural system too, but we do have less expensive pile system and hopefully we can value engineer that. So there is another opportunity to generate some.
What if we use this 27.9 number? At the same time, go back to EMS and talk to them about the issue of this center and the other. Make sure that they are strongly suggesting that the generator go here. If they are, I would want this to be a complete package that town meeting and the voters see without little. But, you know, but wait a second, there's this and there's this. This is our recommendation. I would love for it to be as low as possible. But I think that if they believe it's the right thing to do, and I hear you loud and clear, Joe, it's used as, this is the emergency center. This is where we bring everybody to, we bring the senior community to this place. You're not gonna bring them to the school during the school day at the same time that the school is running. That's not really an option. This is gonna be the place. I would much rather not have little surprises come around the corner. I think that we're open, we're transparent, here's why it's here. I even say, you know, it's 27.9, and here's the thing that we talked to EMS, they believe this is the right thing to do, so the number is 28.3.
We wouldn't have to add the twice. We're holding 500,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, so 27.9 includes the 500?
Yes.
Yes.
Apologies. Then I'm back to 27.9. Thank you.
You can, yeah, you can do it as including the generator and the triple pane windows specifically, or you could just say we're including 500,000.
I have heard, and I think it's worth going back to the EMS, people ask you, how come you're doing a generator and let it go? So maybe we better answer that question.
Yep. I think Joe largely answered it. But, yeah.
So we could say we're carrying the generator now and the cost, and if as the project moves forward, that's deemed not necessary either because of what's happening on Killam or because it's gonna be funded elsewhere, then either the price would be reduced, or is there something else that we'd wanna say, you know, this is what we're gonna include instead of that? Or would the cost come down?
I would say the cost would come down. I'd like to see that better than
Okay.
transfer it over to
Yeah.
something else. Yeah.
With everything, with everything we do, if there's a cost and an offset, and a reduction in cost that will go to offset an increase or eventually go back to the town. Well, we won't necessarily spend it without it. So I don't know, I'm good with the 27.9 even. Explain to you how we get there if anyone's interested.
I know how we get there.
Was that?
CTA's contractor.
Yeah, that's one thing that isn't gonna
It's
happen.
not gonna happen. You can't do it.
Okay, so, what I've heard is that we want to set the project budget at 27.9 million, which would include the stone path, includes, the change in the geotech report, which has some cost savings associated. It includes using triple pane windows in the project to improve sound insulation, but also building performance. And it includes a propane generator. And beyond that, we're going to look at things down the road if there's additional money for insulation or HVAC changes. Those will be considered once we do the energy model. And if the money is available, we'd also like to add solar panels. That's something that's being considered as we go through the process.
But we are going to push back against the fire department and ask whether they really want this generator. Right? Is it rational to have it at Gillam and here? If we can take that out of the project, we can put that money some better use. It would be a better use.
I think it's definitely worth a conversation.
It's worth a conversation. Do they have, is there a state statute which says when you build a new building, you've got to make it a shelter? I don't think so, but there is.
Okay, so
I'll entertain a motion. Do we need to get more specific than the total budget of 27.9?
no, I think we're set the total budget for the project. I mean, an outline has been presented for the budget. So, these things will be factored in. It'll be updated to reflect that total. The other things though we want to include in this motion is, so yes, we have the budget number, we have what's included, we have the alternates. The other item that hasn't been, officially documented as part of this is the construction procurement method. So we've been going forward based on a number of conversations that we would be doing design bid build for this particular project rather than construction manager at risk project. So that does also have an impact on the schedule and the budget. Again, the current numbers that you've looked at and the schedules are based on that design bid build. So I think the motion that's made to approve the budget should be taking that into consideration and documenting that we're approving the budget for this project at 27.9 million. That'll be a design bid build project. It'll include those items I just mentioned. And then that these other items will be considered in the future should funds become available.
John, would you like to give me your thoughts on design bid build or Sam at risk? We fully support that.
We've been through this on Killam, it's okay.
So moved, whatever you just said.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All right, vote. Nancy Toomey,
Yes.
John Coop,
Yes.
Greg Stepler.
Yes.
He's still there. Eric McCormick,
Yes.
Mark Doxer,
Yes.
Nancy Zimlack,
Yes.
Pat Tompkins, yes. Got everyone right? Motion passes. Thank you.
Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you, and Brian, thank you and Joel for getting us there in a very short amount of time. Nancy, I'll take another motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Nancy Toomey,
Yes.
John Coop,
Yes.
Greg Stepler,
Yes.
Greg McCormick,
Yes.
Mark Doxer.
Yes.
Nancy Zimlack,
Yes.
Pat Tompkins, yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
You're an alternate.